I'm going to try not to just give so much emotion to this introduction, but you know that's hard for me, everyone who knows me. Nick Slavik is, simply put it, he's just a great, great human being. And when I find great human beings in this world, I tend to gravitate to them because I love being around wonderful people. And Nick Slavik is the owner of Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration. And let's all give him a clap because he is celebrating his 17th anniversary this year.
Wow.
He employs over 40 people and operates a full-scale finishing shop. Nick is truly amazing. And he does all these things while being married, raising a great family, and just doing so many things. He is a national and international speaker. And Nick, in his spare time, is the chairperson of the board of directors for the PCA. And I'm just going to give the PCA a plug right now because, as you all know, in our EstimateRocket community, we deal with all the different trades. And so we get to go to a lot of trade shows and associations, and I have to say, hands down, the PCA is absolutely extraordinary.
Yep.
But it all comes down to people, right? And the putting, as Corwin Smith said earlier, he was an earlier speaker with us, Nick. He says, putting the people in the right seats on the bus will make your company just flourish. And the PCA has gotten together and put the right people in the right seats. And it has just blown up. So it's a great, great association. We are proud sponsors of this association. We have known Nick for so long. He is a peer to you. And he's going to talk to you today about the state of the economy from a contractor's point of view. And Nick has, he might be very modest today, but he has an extraordinary business. So without further ado, Nick, I'm going to let you have the floor.
Man, I'm going to have to change a few slides to live up to that. No, the feeling is always mutual. Everything that you guys do for my beloved Painting Contractors Association and the industry, I am insanely grateful. I am obviously a house painter, a residential painter, but in the end, I am a contractor. And all the things I'm going to talk about today are basically agnostic to trade, possibly even to service businesses altogether. We're going to talk about a changing market, right? And while I'm going to preface this entire thing by saying I am not a prognosticator. Tom and I talk about this all the time. We love the data, but I love the data that I gather and I trust. Like, you can listen to pundits, you can try to guess the stock market. Nobody is good. When you look at the reports of these hedge funds, the hedge funds are those multi-billion-dollar things where they're supposed to get an outsized market return. If you look at every hedge fund in the United States in 2024 and benchmark them against the S&P, they do worse than just if you bought an index fund in the S&P. So if these guys are the ones that drive Ferraris, devote their life to this, and they can't even guess right, house painter Nick from Minnesota is not going to stand in front of you and say, I know exactly what the market's going to do. What I can tell you is that I collect very simple data over very long time horizons in my business. I mush it into spreadsheets and organize it in a way that helps me make decisions for my business. Kind of agnostic to what's going on in politics, stock market, economy, things like that. Now, having said that, the economy does change what we do, but I would never use it as an excuse to whether I can succeed or fail. I am a firm believer that, especially in the home service market, your success is dependent on your ability to execute your business plan. And part of today is what I'm going to show you in a real-time thing about how I sensed a change in the market, what I looked at to come up with a new strategy, and what that strategy is. And Tom, you tell me, if are we doing a collaborative, a Q&A? Do we leave Q&A to the end? How do you want to?
I'm gonna get handed over to you, and we'll pick it up on the Q&A. I have a funny quote for you today that I'll show you later from an earlier presentation. You're gonna love it.
I cannot wait.
It's all you, Nick.
That's awesome. All right. Well, then we will get to it, everybody. We will, I have the chat up. I'll police it. If I see a relevant question, I will answer it in real time. Otherwise, guys, I do own a influencing company. I do have a show on the internet called Ask a Painter Live. There's nothing I like better than Q&A. So I will leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end so we can discuss all about that stuff. And then plenty of time. There was a nice little break before this. I'm going to leave time in case they want to trigger a break or Q&A or whatever after that. So we're not back to back with you guys here. So, okay, without further ado, this is, I travel around and do a series of master's classes where I take data and experience from my own business, condense it down into usable things, and travel around the country, probably 18 to 25 times a year, and open up my business and my books to everybody and say, here's what has happened, here's what is happening, here's what I think might happen, here's how I came to those conclusions. This is a condensation of what my brain was thinking of earlier this year. So now this graph is fancy and it's colorful. And I do this so I try to impress you guys by how fancy and colorful my graphs are. At its simplest form, this is a graph of how many leads my business gets every single week per year. The left to the right, that is 1 year time horizon. The different colors are different years. So on this graph, we have 2021, which is yellow. We have 2022, which is red. We have 2023, which is blue. And we have 2024, which is green. I do this because I love a great visualization, right? I could look at 52 weeks of data over the course of 4 years and try to find the trends, but your eyes won't pick out the differences between the ones and the zeros and the twos and all that other stuff. What I do is put it into here, not only to impress you guys, but also to have a visualization. Data and feelings is what I traffic in. Almost every single business, especially home service businesses, all traffic in feelings-based decisions. This is not because people are stupid or lazy. It's because they haven't tracked the amount of data, right? The data is what helps us make these decisions. But feelings are there for a reason as well. We can't discount them completely. Case in point, I'm sure this is going to sound familiar to everybody out there. During the last 4 to 5 years, leads have been crazy, right? We've had to expand our business. We've had to find more people. The federal government was giving, the state government, the federal government was giving employees of ours money to go on unemployment and not work. And it was just hard scrabble for us to have enough labor to meet the capacity that it was needed by our clients. Leads were flowing in. Estimators are doing a crazy, I had one estimator doing 33 estimates a week at the height of all this stuff. And so you can't blame me, but I built a business on these crazy surges. We typically average 35 to 45 leads per week in my business. At the time of COVID, look at these graphs right here. The red and the blue, the 22 and 23, what I would consider the height of the irrational COVID market, we were getting almost 80 leads a week in the first part of the year. 80 leads a week. That's 80 times somebody asked us for an estimate. We have about an 85 to 90% set rate for those, because some of them are not even real leads. But 80 to 90% of all of those people actually had an estimate. We have an estimating team of 2, and my guys were literally doing 30 plus estimates a week just to keep up. And we were 2 to 3 weeks booked out in estimates. It was absolutely crazy. That happened a couple years in a row. So naturally, what does a good business owner do? You don't think, well, I'm sure it'll just all go away next year. You think, well, if that's been the case for the last 2 years, I should probably plan on it happening again this year. So again, me and the estimating team, we're clearing out our schedules. We're bracing for impact. We're putting coolers full of water and sandwiches in the estimator's vehicle so they don't even need to stop between estimates. And then it got quiet all of a sudden in the spring, right? It didn't diminish. It wasn't zero, but it wasn't what we were used to. Take a look at the green on there. That was 2024. So I think you can see my cursor on there. Yep, you can see my cursor. So now we're looking at 2024 and we're starting off a year where we're getting, 17, 18 leads a week when we have been used to 50 leads a week in January in my business, right? And then we're getting into February and we're getting 24, 25, 26 leads per week. We had been used to 60 to 70 to 75 leads per week at that same time. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, maybe this is that recession that they've been holding over our head like a guillotine for the last 18 years, right? Ever since the Great Recession, if harken back to 2007, 8, and 9, everybody, when I started my business, There was housing crisis, variable rate mortgages, a Great Recession, unemployment was high, inflation was up, things like that. And ever since then, they say, well, listen, as economists, every 7 to 8 years, we go through a downturn, this like that. So basically, I've been waiting, like almost like wincing, waiting for this thing to happen. Turns out we had about a 15-year tailwind, and then COVID hit. And I got a graph for you later on, another fancy, impressive, colorful graph to show you. But we didn't know what was going to go on in COVID, right? When COVID hit, I thought my business might have been deemed illegal and we would have to shut down and find another way to survive through this thing. Well, turns out we had a slight shutdown and then we rocketed to the moon. I can show you that graph later. And that's what was happening. The problem was when we were in there, I just thought we were doing a really good job of marketing. We were supporting a need in the community. We were meeting this unmet demand in the home service industry. All those things were true. But I forgot to add in the data that we have now, which is super irrational economy, money flowing from the sky, PPP loans, EIDL, people working from home, people on unemployment. It's illegal to go to an Italian vacation, so we got 15 grand to throw into the house now because it's now our office and our school. That's what we were doing. I only recognize this in hindsight because I looked at the leads through my business, right? So now, what we're looking at here is in green, it builds up in the spring. We have some little spikes. It moderates out. Actually, if we're looking at these graphs, to have a graph like red, where you get peaks and peaks and peaks and a whole bunch of stuff, and then it kind of mellows out through the year, I would much rather have it even. I don't like doing 60 estimates a week and then back down to 20 and things like this. I like it even. Green, 2024, is actually a much better graph. If you look at the trend line for 2024, it's kind of a nice even line like this. Naturally, you can see the general trend line, which is the leads always typically start off the year strong and then taper off, the proclivity of getting leads per week. So this is a visualization to show you. My mind was saying, well, not my mind, the data was saying leads are down this year. And I was trying to figure out, is this the cataclysmic fall of the United States economy? Is this where things get tough? Is this where the first layoff I have in 17 years happens? Never laid a human off, unlimited overtime policy. Because of this sort of thing. I have never once laid off a human. We constantly need more humans. I finally thought this was the year that it was going to happen because of that. Now, the only reason that I figured out that my thesis was maybe it's a cataclysmic downfall of the American economy, but maybe it's just something different. Right? But I needed some data to go with these feelings. The feelings are the leads down. Oh my God, the sky's falling. It's horrible. But I wanted to make sure before I started just laying people off because we didn't have enough leads. Turns out we did have enough leads. And what you're staring at now is a graph of every week, every quarter, and a consolidated year of every single lead that came into my business. I categorize it. We have about 13 different ways that people can find us. I track every lead for every one of those. I track all the spending for it. And that gives us this beautiful trifecta of data, which is cost per lead, cost per estimate, and cost per completed job. And I track the trends through those things. Which forms of marketing do well? Is something on the up? Is something on the down? Does something get super expensive? Do we get a ton of leads on Instagram, but none of them turn into jobs? Things like that. This is the data that I went back to. And because it's sort of what you would consider like metadata, it's just big bulk data. You can arrange it any way you want. You can sort these spreadsheets in any way you like, right? And I was looking for some trend lines in there. And honestly, I looked back through a year of data and all I could prove is that we had less leads, right? So then we started looking at more economic indicators like, okay, I'm not finding anything immediately in my data. Let's start thinking about the economy. Maybe this is the economic downturn. So what I was seeing is, oh, economy's up, economy's good, right? Inflation started going down, give or take. The problem is they took out two volatile numbers in there. I think it's fuel and food, I believe, out of that, which are honestly some of the most inflationary numbers in there. So it's kind of tough to then parse that out. Is inflation actually going down, or are the things that aren't that volatile going down, give or take? Interest rates were kind of going up. And honestly, right now, with inflation going down and other things changing, we haven't seen a crazy change in the interest rates out there for like new home purchases, right? Cost of housing. In my area, a new house used to be $225,000 to $260,000. It is now over $400,000 for an entry-level house out there on average. That is a ton of money. That is a precipitous rise in the last little bit. Organic job applications, folks. Tonight, I am going to be making job offers to 4 to 5 people, right? For the last 15 years, we have dedicated our entire life to recruiting. This is another data point that I look at. It has been nearly impossible to find as many people as we need, right? It takes so much effort. For the equivalent of about $5,000 worth of energy and job ads out there, I could find 2 pretty good candidates to bring into my business to be craftspeople, right? $5,000 worth of ads and energy that go into that. 2 weeks ago, I put one simple Indeed ad out there. I paid $36. I had 80 applicants in 48 hours, and I had to shut the ad down. I physically don't have enough time to go through them. I put a Facebook and an Instagram post out with that same thing on and put my website and my application form on it, and I had 20 other applicants go to that. I had over 100 applicants for this last job. It's an entry-level job. We start people at $20, apprenticeship program, all this and that, and I ended up doing 24 phone interviews. I did 13 in-person interviews this week, and I'm going to make 4 to 5 job offers tonight based on that stuff. This is markedly different than it was. In the time of COVID, you had to employ your cousin. If you put a job ad out there, everybody's getting unemployment. Everybody's thinking about work differently. Everybody's at home, quarantine, things like that. It was a bloodbath. It was a slog out there to try to get enough humans. Now, I would consider, now that I have this data, we'll get into this a little bit, there was time pre-COVID, there was the irrational COVID times, and I am firmly a believer now, based on this data, that we are outside of COVID times, resuming the normal economy. Not good, not bad, resuming normal. We are back to normal. People, after a somewhere between 3 and 5 year run of not working, sitting at home, running up consumer debt, running out of savings, collecting unemployment, at some point, the reality of life sets in when somebody would like to potentially have a partner and start a family, potentially live in a house that they own, potentially get a car, potentially have fulfillment through a career. During those irrational times, those things were kind of made different. Different decisions were made. Now, I think we're back to normal life. And I believe that my job ad and the response to it is not an anomaly, and it's not anecdotal. I bet you that's a repeatable thing for almost every company out there right now. So leads were down. But again, I would always put the asterisk compared to what? Anecdotal social media chatter. I am a part of about 122 different painter Facebook forums on the internet. And again, you can substitute painter for home service industry, all that other stuff. But either way, for the last 15 years, the only chatter has been, where's all the good people, right? We've probably all said it in the service industry. There's no good people out there. Kids these days, they're lazy, this and that. I put a job ad out and half the people don't even show up for a phone interview, things like that. The chatter on social media is where's all the good people for the last 15 years. I noticed about 18 months, 24 months ago, nobody really had that concern anymore. Everybody started wondering, hey, how do you guys get leads? How do you market? Give me a name of a good marketing agency, things like that. It really hit me, and I really started to dig in and find, like, really narrow in on my solution when I would see people from the upper Midwest. I'm a Minnesota guy. We have about 5 months a year to paint outside, and if you minus out evenings, weekends, rain, temperature days, we have about 75 days a year where we can paint outside. I saw many, many examples of house painters in the upper Midwest in June who had no work on the books. That is crazy. For the last 15 years, all I can speak about is the last 15 to 17 years because that's how I owned a business. If you had a phone number and a website and you were not a crook, your entire summer and potential winter was full as a house painter, right? Now, these same people, it's June, the highest peak of the season, and they don't have a job on the books. Typically, these guys are overwhelmed. That caught my attention in a real way. The other interesting thing is people make this argument about the S&P 500 being up. You can see my graph here, stock market up. But if you look at what's driving it, there's only a couple stocks. They're all tech related, AI related, social media related, things like that. And then if you minus those out, the stock market looks completely different. So what I am seeing out there is this rising gap between, if you aggregate the data, oh, everybody's doing good. If you take out a couple super high flyers, I don't know if we're doing so good. I think we might just be okay or standard or back to normal, give or take. I bring up this slide because this is how I focus my effort as a business owner. I believe there are only 2 main problems that we devote the majority of our time to: finding labor and finding leads, right? And I believe this is a teeter-totter because labor has been the hardest thing on earth to find for the last 15 years. It's not impossible, but we had to be very intentional. We had to spend money and time to get it. Leads came down from heaven like manna. I believe, based on the data in my company and these anecdotal data from the internet, and speaking with other home service companies across the country, we have precipitously flipped now. Labor is falling down from heaven like manna. I put a simple ad out for $36. We got over 100 candidates. That's wild. I haven't had this experience in 10 years of business, right? But all of a sudden leads went down. So I believe that the economic indicator, I watch my economic indicator, this teeter-totter. And when this flips, to me, it's not the end of the world. You just devote what time you used to put towards labor towards leads, right? But you have to know where. If labor is still hard and you devote all your time to leads, then all of a sudden you're going to fall behind on labor. You're going to have too many leads. You're out of stasis again. So knowing that this occurs, sensing when it happens, and knowing what to do when that happens is the thesis of my entire talk today. So what should we change, right? Something has changed. The economy is different. I believe we're out of COVID times. So what? Leads are down. What do we do? Here's the thing. I believe that because there was this crazy run up in the COVID market, I have some data here to show you guys that we may need to look at more things than just marketing. If we need more leads and we need more sales, you have to look at what you're selling. We are doing tons of estimates out there. We typically close 40%, 45% of our estimates. That leaves 50 to 55% out there that we're not closing. Number one, if we adjusted our price a little, might we be able to capture that? But if we adjust our price, does it make it unprofitable? Does it set a bad precedent? Can we make money off this sort of thing? Is it sustainable? All the questions that I was looking for. Or do we just need more marketing again for more leads? So let's talk about price first. There is I probably get 100 emails a week from painters through my Ask a Painter live show, all looking for some sort of advice. I give away my resources, all that other good stuff. In the 9 years I've been doing Ask a Painter, I don't think I've ever once given somebody the advice, lower your prices, if I'm being honest. When somebody gives me a look into their business and we start gathering a little bit of data and I start trying to figure out what maybe the big friction point is for them that they're seeing and maybe not seeing, I never see the data that points to you are overpriced, right? In fact, it's completely the opposite. When I look at most people's data, I think you're giving your work away. And typically this takes the form of somebody who says to me these feelings-based statements. I am the best. I'm the most expensive in my market, and I'm booked up 2 years in advance. And I would say, oh, really? Because based on economic indicators and facts and reality, that would point to you being overpriced. If you're booked out 2 years and you think you can't increase your prices anymore, I would bet you if you saw all your competitors' estimates, you would probably be much less than them. Supply and demand. If you give away something for free, people will take a lot of it. You should not be booked out 2 years in a home service business, right? My business will do about $3 million of residential repaint, average job size, 5,000, 5,500, give or take. We want to be booked out about 2 weeks at the most. We want to be booked out 1 week for some job, no more than 2 weeks for other jobs, and we are maintaining that year round right now. It's razor thin, but it's a huge competitive advantage, right? If we were booked out 8 months, I would be looking into this saying, why are we selling so much work, right? And are these clients actually waiting for us? So long way around to saying, we're going to go back in here and I want to explore price, right? Because we have enough data. We've been around for 17 years. If anybody's going to be overpriced, it might be a company who collects all the data, increases their prices with the market. COVID, we just went through this crazy time. I wanted to make sure that we weren't selling as much jobs or finding out where they are based on that data. So here's the thing. I went back to 2023 versus last year, and I looked at all the numbers, but two numbers stuck out to me very clearly. I looked at exteriors and I looked at sub work. We have full in-house master craftspeople W-2. We have part-time W-2s, about 10, 14 of them that come back every year. And then we have a whole bunch of trade partners, subcontractors that help us with this work. Typically, we bifurcate down interior, exterior. Subs typically do a lot of the crazy big exteriors. They're insanely good at it. Our in-house people typically do the super delicate, intricate, fine finishing, trim cabinets, things like that. We have some crossover. Two numbers stuck out to me. In 2023 to 2024, there's almost never a year where we see decreases in certain things. I looked at my exterior, the percentage of exterior work we did. It comprised 42% of all my revenue in 23, 33% in 24. What are our most expensive jobs? Exteriors, right? I looked at the amount of sub work. We did 42% of all of our revenue in subcontracting work in 23, 45% in 2024, right? So there's a slight increase, but when I parsed it out through the data, we had a whole bunch of commercial jobs and huge interiors that we gave to subs. I looked at the number of exteriors and it matched the amount of data. We actually did fewer exteriors of houses from year to year, 23 to 24. In the 17-year history of that company, that has never happened. So why, right? Why? I zeroed in on the cost. This is my job costing, right? If any home service contractor or any business for that matter does not job cost, it's only a time before you fail. Job costing is tracking material and labor. I'm not going to get into it now. This is a very long discussion, but for years and years, we did 3D models of exteriors of houses. We tracked production rates. We measured, we timed, we did all this stuff to come up with our pricing model. This is my price Bible right here. What we did then, because I don't want my people measuring, we converted everything into unit pricing. One of the more innovative things we do in the industry is we have 13 different types of exteriors, right? Everything from a small little shoebox house to a Victorian mansion, historic restorations, monstrous stucco homes, lake homes, LP siding, all this other stuff. When we combined all our data, we found out that we had 13 different types of homes that we do. They all kind of group along the same amount of exterior square footage and the same price. The beautiful thing about this model is I can go back and say, well, within the exteriors, we know we did less exteriors. My theory is, because I've been doing this long enough and I'm looking at the data, is that I feel like during the irrational times of COVID, the leads were going crazy. The demand for us went high. I increased my prices. I kept increasing because there was almost too much demand for what we do. All of a sudden, the economy changes, and I think I better make sure that my prices aren't the thing that's holding us back. When I looked at the data, we group our houses in those 13 times by small, medium, large, extra large, XXL, XXXL, and then we start with the historic restorations, and we start with the stucco because it's a different, production rate. What I found is there were 3 different types of houses right in the middle. They weren't the smallest. They weren't the crazy big historic restorations. They were the bread and butter houses that we do, like the medium, large, and extra large. We did the fewest amount of those that we ever have. In fact, they made up for all the difference in the number of exteriors that we did. We did fewer numbers of those. So at that point, I said, you know what? Those are actually the ones, because I keep a pricing model and review it every year, those are the ones that we have been rapidly increasing our prices to meet this demand or try to quell the demand as we go up. So I looked at that and I said, this might round out my theory that I think we are actually overpriced. I can make a data-based argument backed up by feelings and anecdotes that 3 of the 13 types of houses that we estimate might actually be overpriced, right? So now, how do we come up with the perfect price? I use a market pricing model, and we've gone past production rates. We don't measure anymore. We use unit pricing because we have so much data. The perfect price to me is the most you can possibly charge while you have a full schedule, and when you produce it, you can produce it profitably. I say this because all 3 of these things have to be right in order for my pricing model to work. This pricing model did not work year over year. We actually went down slightly in revenue year over year. I traced it back to exteriors. Within exteriors, I traced it back to those 3 houses. The most you can charge. I believe that was the most I could charge, right? The problem was our schedule wasn't full. We had a noticeable amount of less exteriors for our subcontractors and W-2s this last year. We had open capacity that we could have filled with these things. So the middle one, the full schedule thing, was off. The rule of my market price model is, number 1, you fill the schedule. You keep increasing your prices until you have a gap in the schedule. Then you moderate there. And then every once in a while, you test the upper limits of those prices again until you have a gap. Turns out we had a gap in summer. So now we need to moderate our prices, potentially even take them down because they had been irrationally accelerated through the irrational economy of COVID. This is my theory. I also say this because I have a theory about estimating, especially with kind of transactional jobs like $5,000 or less average job size home services, right? I truly believe that we are relational. We We are a trustworthy company. We have beautiful cream and tan uniforms. We're all very professional. But in the end, I truly believe this, and this guides my estimating and pricing model, which is I believe a third of the people we estimate for will always take us. A third of the people will never take us. We might be able to sway the third. So what this tells me is if I'm going to tell my estimators we need more jobs, we need more exteriors, do I tell them take more time on the estimates we already have and see if you can increase the success ratio? Or do I tell them just do more estimates? If you believe this, which I believe, and this doesn't mean we're impersonal. This just means that I'm looking at the data saying it's less up to us than we think. This theory of estimating would then show me they just need to do more estimates because less and less is up to us, but the estimates have to be the right price. So through my show, Ask a Painter, we have done national pricing experiments where professional painting contractors from all over the country have estimated the same 3 jobs. We look at an interior wall project in a bedroom, we look at a set of kitchen cabinets, and we look at an exterior. When I look at the exteriors, we all estimate the same project, by the way. And what I'm seeing here is total for the whole country up here. We have the Midwest, Upper East, West, and South. The exterior numbers are the ones green here, right? The most interesting thing to me is this, right? In total, this is a crazy number. In total, for all the professional painting contractors who did this, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds from all over the United States, there was an 89.1% difference between the highest and the lowest estimate on average for the same job by people who would consider themselves professional painting contractors. Right? Price disparity. If you go to buy a Ford F-150, if you take 500 dealerships and ask them what the price is for that F-150, you're not going to get an 89% price difference, right? This is an indication that not only the painting industry, but the home service industry is largely fragmented and unprofessionalized. Very small businesses running off feelings and really not a lot of data, and certainly don't have standard operating procedures, employee manuals, a metric-based bidding system, things like that. So now I say this because we can adjust our prices a little, but there's still so much irrationality out there. And now we're up against house painter in June who has no work on the books. What do you think he does to his prices? All the way down to the bottom. So now it may not matter what we do with our exterior prices. So at the start of this year, I took those 3 avatars of houses and I greatly reduced the rates for those things. I looked all the way back to 2019 to my data to look at where the COVID numbers got those market rates off like that. So I brought them back down to a reasonable price. I know we can produce them profitably. My hopes now for this spring and summer is that we sell more and produce more. And we have an average weekly goal that we need to sell, an average weekly goal that we need to produce. And we're on track. We're actually ahead. We're 2 houses ahead sold. We haven't begun our exterior season, but we're 2 houses ahead of our goal right now for that selling. And I'm going to be watching the types of houses we sell and the profitability of them as we go on to see if my theory is right. So now what about marketing? We're also probably going to need some more chances for these jobs just in case, right? Because what if this is a recession coming? What if this is another cataclysmic downturn? I want to be in control of my leads. I do not want to have my first layoff ever. So let's talk about some marketing stuff. The basis of this, we can talk about all my fancy marketing, the 13 forms, the channels that people get a hold of me. But there is the quadrinity. If you do not have a website, if you don't have a Google page, if you don't have Facebook, if you don't have Instagram, don't even think about any other forms of paid marketing. This can fuel a business between $400K and $1 million if it's done consistently over a long time horizon, right? Because of my business was rapidly growing, we also had to add in paid marketing because word of mouth, repeat, and referral, and this stuff doesn't keep up as fast as you want it to. But I say this because I'm going to show you some of the cool things I'm doing in marketing, but it's built on a base of boring, unsexy, standard stuff like having an easy to navigate website and a Google listing that I update weekly and a Facebook and Instagram page that's super active, got tons of followers. I mean, Instagram, I think I got, 7,500 posts, give or take. We got 13,000 followers on my ad or my Facebook page because we're just consistently marketing over. We're posting, we're chatting, we're being active on there, right? So there's 2 kinds of marketing channels that I would consider in my world, right? There are low-cost, non-scalable, right? Local newspaper. It costs me $350 to $400 to advertise a month there, right? They send it out to 16,000 households. It'll never be 32,000 households in my lifetime, right? So if you wanted to triple down on your newspaper leads because they're super cheap, I mean, you could pay for a bigger ad, but it's not going to any more houses, right? So there's ways you can manipulate in there, but you're never going to scale it up. Then there's the high cost scalable. Through Google or Meta, you can market to every single human on this earth, billions and billions of people. It's going to cost you everything you own, right? So we have low cost, non-scalable, yard signs. We have high cost and scalable, Google AdWords. So I think about marketing like that. I want to maximize the low cost, non-scalable. You're not going to grow a business completely off of those things, but they're always going to make up like this 1 to 20 to 30% of my leads. If I didn't do any of them, we would have a noticeable less amount of leads, but it's never going to make up the bulk. But it's also can't get rid of them because they make up a noticeable amount. You see the pattern here. So between the green, we have Facebook, we have flyers and mailers, every door direct mail, we have web search. Those are very expensive, scalable things. We can insert some money, we can be specific, we can do some things, but it's a pretty expensive form of marketing. So we need to temper it with some low cost, non-scalable marketing. Previous clients, word of mouth, yard signs, vans, things like that, right? That's what we need to do in there. Vans comprise 4.2% of my revenue. If I was looking at that, it didn't cost us anything because our vans were wrapped 7 years ago, give or take, right? It does cost money to have those vans, but if I was a shareholder in this company and I wanted to increase the amount of van leads, you either have to take the vans you have and circle them around these neighborhoods forever or buy more vans. That's super costly, right? So it's a fairly inexpensive form now, and it's basically non-scalable. Your vans are going to be out there doing their stuff. If you want to increase van leads, you would have to increase vans, and that's the most expensive form of marketing, I would argue. So now, 2023 strategy. I said, God, I want one simple solution. I'm going to go flyers and mailers. I'm going to send postcards to people's houses. That's going to be my form of marketing. I'm going to double down. I'm going to take most of my marketing budget, send it towards there, and we're just going to do that one thing. That'll be the one lever I pull. It sort of worked, but it was expensive. 44% of all of my leads and jobs came from flyers and mailers in 2023. The problem was I would keep spending, but after I spent and got my 836 leads from that in 2023, every dollar would get me less leads, called diminishing returns, right? So the problem was $20,000 would get you X amount of leads. 40,000 wouldn't get you 2X of that leads from 20K. And that was a problem. So I found the area where the next dollar didn't get me another lead, and I capped my spending with that there. And then I devoted my time to the other things, which was my 2024 plan, which is general principle, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I feel like if the economy is changing, things are going to get a little different. Diversification feels great. I diversified my internal labor. I diversified my external labor. And I feel like we should be doing lots of other things to diversify because we never know where the hit's going to be. We never know where the wins are going to be, things like that. So now what you're seeing in 2024, I diverted a lot of things. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different forms of marketing that comprise no more than 20% on each of those things. We did Instagram, we did flyers and mailers, we did word of mouth and previous client, reactivations, right? We did web search, Google AdWords, and all those sort of things in there to kind of, now we have 4 to 5 different areas that comprise our leads, not just one major one. Because again, if my distributor of flyers, my printer and mailer, if he decided to retire, that'd be a threat vector for me, right? So now, to this year, things have changed. I talk a lot. Now we're going to get to what I think is going to happen this year and what my company is actually going to do. We are going to focus our market. We used to market to about 15 to 18 different zip codes. We are now going to take it down to about 5. And how do we know which 5? The beauty of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. You guys saw my spreadsheets, my big metadata. Turns out those things are learning models. They are just big spreadsheets full of gross data, just like bulk data. Artificial intelligence is trained off of large chunks of data that you just feed into it, right? So it turns out when people were describing how artificial intelligence works and ChatGPT can help you, it's like, oh my God, I have 17 years of these spreadsheets of just raw data in there that you can feed in, and it can make some sense of these things and maybe find some things that I didn't, patterns. So what I did was, if I believe that we need to diversify, but we also need to focus where our dollars go, I want every dollar of marketing to be more efficient than it was the year before as we go on. I believe a strategy of being local and present, which is, you can see my flyer that I send out right now, Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration, your New Prague painter. These flyers go to the town of New Prague, and it's got this number on there, and it's got a New Prague house on the front of it. Every single one of my top 3 to 5 cities will have a specific thing, all these cities that I live in right around here, and I'm going to be dropping those in those because I am hyper local, I'm hyper present. We're not a traveling painter. We're not from out of town. I was born and raised here. I'm going to let people know about it. I am here to serve this community, raising a family, raising a business. What you're seeing on the left here, this black screen, is my communication with ChatGPT. I fed it in many thousand-line spreadsheets of my leads, of my job costing, and things like that. And through a series of about 5 questions, we got down to the point where I asked, what are my top 5 cities and what is the best marketing method in each of those cities? And then so it spit that out. It'll give me my top 5 and it'll say direct mail works best in this city. Meta, Facebook, Instagram works best in this city. So now we have a targeted method to say, by statistics, if I had to prove or justify my marketing system, I can look at the data from my company, not just feelings, and say, here's my marketing plan, right? You can also say, oh my God, here's my households right here. We're looking at my top city is Lakeville. There are 25,000 people there. And I fed it in the cost of my marketing. And I said, if I want to hit Lakeville 4 times a year with specific ads, based on the number of residents there, if you drop out the bottom 30% of income, what would it cost for me to touch every one of these people? And it'll come up and say, it actually says $2,179 per week. And you can touch every single one of those humans in every one of your top 5 cities 4 times a year. And then you can say, well, how about 6 times a year? Now it'll be $2,600 a week. So this is how we quickly do this. I used to use Fiverr. I used to use internal people. I used to comb over this stuff for days. Now I feed this stuff into ChatGPT. I have it help me make decisions for me. And I give it a strategy and it helps me come up with how to actually tactically do that strategy, right? So here it is. Is it a good or a bad economy? I don't care. The economy is what it is. Whether it's good or bad, I don't have the ability to change it. I absolutely have the ability to change my own personal and professional economy. So here's what I found. Remember this leads, fancy pants graph here? My graph of leads, since the time of my business starting in 2007, through the Great Recession, then the normal times, through COVID, and now back onto this other stuff, it exactly matched this graph, which is the gross domestic product of the United States. You can overlay my leads onto this graph and it exactly follows that. What you're seeing on this graph here is I started my business about here, 2007, right at that time. Immediately, the country plunged into recession, right? And look how low the gross domestic product was. It's lower than the depth of COVID. So in my first 2 years of business, I lived through something worse than COVID. And honestly, I didn't know it. I wasn't mature enough at that time. Then we spiked up again, right? And then here we are, normal time. There's a trend line that goes through this thing, right? Like this, right? So now here's 2019. You can see my little cursor there, the second arrow. COVID hits, precipitous down. All money comes from the heavens, precipitous up. Guess what? The gross domestic product of the United States dropped and it's back to here. You overlay a trend line on this. Look at this. We are right where we're at before COVID. We've picked up. If you minus out COVID, these data points connect right here. So now, is it a bad economy? If you don't have this data, 23 to 24 to 25 has been on a downward trend. But you need to back up, take a look at more data to see if it's actually bad. Or is it just going back to normal? My thesis, I'm not a prognosticator. I can look at this. I can look at the data I trust, is that it is not bad. It's going down, but it's going back down to normal. And it's still on the rise. So we are back to normal times, folks. We are back to the time pre-COVID. We're going 2010 to 2019, right? There's a 9 or 10 year span right here where the economy did just nice, boring, simple, awesome stuff, right? We're back there. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I know that the sky is not falling. We're likely not going into a recession. I'm sick of that thing. And we're going to just keep on plodding forward. So what that means for me is we're not going to have a layoff. The sky is not falling. This isn't the end times. I'm going to go back to hard scrabble, hardcore marketing, just like we did to the times before COVID. I'm switching my effort from finding labor. I'm moving that time and money that I would have used there over to here. We're still going to recruit labor. It's just going to take less time and money. We're going to move that over to finding leads now. Consumer confidence is down. Stock market is up. Inflation is high but lowering. Interest rates are up, and we have soaring home prices. But at the end, I trust the data from my company, because based on all those things, I don't know what that tells me to do about marketing, right? Should I increase? Should I decrease? Should I focus? Should I mass market? Things like that. I trust the data from my own company. So in the end, I saved some time for Q&A here. I am the board chair of the PCA. If you like any of this type of thinking, this type of data, this type of feelings, there are 1,380 other humans exactly like me. The majority of them have businesses bigger and more professional than mine and what we're talking about here, all at the Painting Contractors Association. If you're not a painting contractor, it's a trade association for service businesses. We have business professionalization. We have tactical training for all of our painters. You will be inspired by the humans at this. And in fact, I'm going to see the Drost, all the EstimateRocket people, next week at the Expo. It is a gathering of 1,200 to 1,500 humans. We're going to be at Colorado Springs, and it's a week of education of doing stuff like this. I know EstimateRocket's going to be there in full support, and I can't wait to hang out with you guys. So, QR code for the PCA, my personal email address if you have questions or you just want to commiserate as a service business owner, and I am open for questions.
Nick, as usual, you've blown my mind.
Tom, and as promised, 70% of this is new stuff that has never been put out to the public before. You saw this a month ago when I was still working through my thesis.
Yeah,
I progressed it a little farther now. As promised, I want to deliver something special to you and your people. So,
that's absolutely amazing, and it's really so. Just a couple of corroborating things from my data. We for our painting companies, 22 to 23 was a minus overall. Now some gained, some lost, but overall it was a minus 7.9% sales drop. But 23 to 24 was a 7.6 sales increase. And concrete repair is up 13%, 22, 23, down and up 20%, 23 to 24. And, they go on like that. Now, a couple of them went down. Again, it's not, they're not all equal, but
the business size and the level of professionalization has a direct result on that, because there are going to be some people that constantly have the huge numbers, and there's going to be some people in the same economy that are actually going downward. So
right, no question about it. It's just it's amazing analysis and amazing data, and I think your approach is really key. That you've got to look at data. You can't make your decisions on just feelings, because everybody's not the same. I mean, how you run your business makes a difference, because guess what? In every trade there are always going to be people buying services, always, right? Even in the worst of times. They may get more selective, they may do things differently, but the reality is that it's always going to be there. Who gets it is going to vary based on how well you do your job of figuring out what you need. Do you need people or do you need marketing, which is brilliant.
So it's really interesting in looking, and I have grown to have a lot of compassion. I traffic in a world of brutality where I appreciate people being brutal with me. I've come to understand that most people don't like that sort of treatment. So I've come to have a lot of compassion for the unprofessionalized single owner operator of a home service company, because I was one of those longer than I've been. I mean, I've been in this industry for 30 years. I have this professional business 7 or 8 years. We've been working on it, give or take. Right. I have been the unwashed masses, the no data, only feelings guy for longer than I have been the data guy. So I have compassion for this. And the truly heartbreaking thing is some people don't even realize that this is the case yet. Right? And by the time they actually realize, oh my God, I think I need to do X, it's beyond the point where they could do it. because you can't spin up a marketing campaign, get your word out there. There's some things you can do to get immediate leads, but really this is one of those investment things where, just like with our humans and our businesses, you don't hire 6 people and become profitable the next day. You have to invest in them over a long time horizon, and either your patience, your pain tolerance, or your money is going to run out typically before you see that through. And that's where my heart does go out to these guys who aren't tracking this stuff, because it's not a fun way to run a business, you know?
Right. And it's not trivial to do. I mean, you have to have the mindset to do it. It's getting easier. If you've got systems that'll help you do that, track the data for you, that's getting easier and easier. I'm always inspired to add reports to EstimateRocket after I look at some of the things you're doing analysis-wise. But and the graphs, I've never been a huge fan of graphs. However, there are certain things that there is no substitute for graphs. I don't care how good you are with the numbers. The pictures, when they're done honestly and fairly, really do tell a story. Just
and you know,
graphs lie, but
Jason Paris, our friend, says liars figure and figures lie. And you can listen, if I'm being honest, you and I both know that could have not been based on any data. I could have just drawn some lines on here like, Absolutely. Hey guys, listen, you know, this is the deal right here. Honestly, I have the feeder sheets where I literally have a line that says week 13 in 2023, how many leads I got. And that feeds onto that sheet. So one of the coolest things I found on a graph, one of the first things I ever did was compile how many leads I got and then how many jobs I did and the revenue. Right. And early on, I found this beautiful pattern. I had a feeling that spring was busy and fall was busy, but we found this double camel hump pattern every year in the upper Midwest based on the leads and the revenue. So now when I hired my estimating team and my project management team, I can now make that into usable data, which is there's huge demand in spring, there's huge demand in fall. So guys, if you're going to take some vacations, before the hump, between the humps, after the hump, but we got to prepare for this area right here. And I can actually show you with the data that we need to do this. This is my feeling. So
yeah, no, I know. And by the way, I know those were based on real data because I've looked at the sales numbers that corroborate that in terms of, you know, they're lagging your lead numbers by about a month in terms of how the sales flow goes. There's
the time somebody calls our company to when we paint their house, you take that graph and shift it over 4 bars, and that's exactly it.
Yeah. That's just wild stuff. It's amazing. Yeah, a couple comments about a lot of information. Well presented, great job, thank you. There's so much there. It's almost hard to ask questions about it because it really does need digesting. So
there is a strategy to that. When I first started going to industry events, people gapped the living heck out of me. And I still enjoy it to this day where we are here and they show us something way out here. And it's hard to even understand, oh my God, wait a second. How does that even work? And that sort of thing inspired me though. And I don't intentionally try to gap people, but I do try to present things on the outer edge of my knowledge in the hopes that people like me are then inspired by it. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question came in. So this is not just the painting market and can be applicable to other service markets that operate throughout a single year. Unquestionably, Nathan, that is totally true. And Nick would support that. However, there are some geographical differences. So if you're in the part of the country that experiences winter, the way we Northerners experience winter, then you're going to have a slightly different pattern. And depending upon how influenced your particular trade is by interior versus exterior work, definitely, makes a big difference. But Nathan, I think that's something that I'll be working on is some trade-oriented and regional-oriented graphing of how the general sales trends are for the different trades in different regions.
And don't ever overlook the fact of where those leads come from. If your business, your home service business, is solely dependent on contractors, this is a whole nother graph. You need to overlay this because now the marketing and sales ain't up to you. You're standing by waiting for that relationship to give you work like that. And if I'm being honest, there's a reason I don't do a lot of contractor work. Number one, GCs, with all due respect to your contractor clients, it's hard to find ones that share the core values with us. And number two, if I wanted to triple the amount of work I do for that general contractor, I would have to make him triple the size of his business. And to me, I don't control that. I'm happy to do it. but it's a threat vector for me. So you have to go through a whole nother set of like reason and equation at that point. So
yeah, and it's a whole different margin. That relationship is a whole different margin system because
basically a
let's face it, everybody along the chain, it wants to make a certain markup, a certain margin, and so somebody's going to suffer in that.
Yep, 100%.
Either the client, the sub, or the general contractor. But those are things you got to balance. Yeah, 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 for sure. That's just wow. Yep.
Listen, Tom, thank you so much for the opportunity. And here to serve. If anybody needs anything, I am ready and willing. I don't have an assistant. I don't have an AI bot. If you send me an email, Nick will send you an email back. And I will try to be as thoughtful as I can. Not next week, though, because I'm going to my expo.
Yeah.
Nick, again, thank you so much for coming on. And we are so appreciative of your time.
Now, I'm grateful for what you guys are doing, and thank you for the opportunity.
One last quick question. I've been an owner-operator for the last 2 years and have not touched marketing except for Facebook and yard signs. What would be the best way for me to start moving to professionalism like yourself, and how much energy and time should I start putting into marketing as an owner-operator to increase leads?
You can, that's very personal, that you can solve problems in your business with time or money or both. Early on, if you are a smaller, unprofessionalized business, I would urge you to use time over money, because money is not something we have a surplus of. You typically have time. So there's ways, there's very specific tactical things that I can give you, which is if you want leads right now, you pick up the phone, call your friends, call your family, call your neighbors, call your community members, anybody associated with your church, with your kids' hockey leagues, all this other stuff. You will make stuff out of there. You will get jobs out of there. It's solely reliant on your ability to just do it. The next thing is if you got a gap in the schedule, a week gap, I would print off a bunch of flyers, go door to door, stick them in the door. For the love of God, don't put them in mailboxes. You will go to jail. But you can go door to door, and depending on how aggressive you want to be, you could slip a flyer in a door. You could put a door hanger on. You could even knock on the door, right? But you got to have like a solicitor's permit for these towns. Now, if you've gone past that and you're a professionalized business and you're scaling and growing, you have all your numbers down and you're running up and you're outstripping your word of mouth, repeat, and referrals, now you have to get into the more sophisticated paid marketing. I would always do somewhere between 3 and 5 different things, micro experiments, and every single week you need to be looking at that data. On my website, whenever anybody wants an estimate, there's a drop-down box and you have to pick one of my 13 forms of marketing. That when somebody submits an estimate request, it goes immediately to a G sheet that populates all those things. This is kind of like a homemade system like this. It's served me pretty well. Yeah. But then I take that G sheet every week and I put it on one of those spreadsheets that makes the colorful graphs that says how many leads did we get this week and where did they come from. So now when you if you throw 200 at flyers, 200 at Facebook, Instagram, 200 at Google AdWords every week, you can look at that now and say, based on that 200, what are we starting to see? I can't prove this, and I don't want you to. Marketers will tell you to do this forever. If you don't get results, you just need to keep going. I don't necessarily believe that, but what I do believe is that you do need to do this over a period of time. If you take $1,000, do it in flyers, and you only get one call and call that a disaster, you haven't done it. There's a long tail to these flyers. Within the first week or two, you'll get 80% of the leads you could potentially get. And then diminishing returns to the point where you'll still get people calling you 2 years later from a flyer that they keep on their fridge. So micro amounts, diversified over 3 to 5 things, tracked every week. If you go 9 to 10 weeks and you haven't got a lead from a Google ad, I would keep pushing that down and keep increasing whatever other form of marketing that you have got success from. And then 5 years later, you have a system like mine.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to do it in different markets are different. In certain markets, in certain areas, you're going to find one thing works better than the other. And there's no necessarily hard and fast rule on it.
But you need the data to figure that out. And every year, I think we get 2,200 leads. That's 2,200 data points. Every one of those leads has a marketing source from it. And when you feed it into ChatGPT, if you only have 5 leads, that's very anecdotal, and I wouldn't base a whole marketing plan. But if you have 2,200 a year for 17 years, that's some data you can go off of. You're going to find some really distinct trends.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sorry, I'm over my time, but I could literally
Yep.
talk about this for 3 years.
We could easily keep going. That was awesome, and really look forward to seeing you out at the expo next week.
See you
We
next
leave
week, guys.
soon.
Yep, that's it. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Nick. Take care.